Éric, nice to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Happy to be here.
Now, the vote went as expected with a second majority for the CAQ. But, you know, as resounding a victory as it was for Legault, the party did fail to make gains on the island of Montreal. Can you talk to us about that essential roadblock for Legault?
I do think that is going to be a disappointment today for François Legault, because the CAQ was hoping to make some inroads on the island of Montreal, and they had some expectations that they could pick up a few seats. And earlier on in the campaign, they were probably in a pretty good position to do that. But I think that over the course of the 5 weeks, a lot of the statements that the Premier made regarding immigration, and some of his candidates as well, probably alienated quite a few voters on the island of Montreal, and among Anglophone voters, who were not very happy about Bill 96. I think it did limit the CAQ's ability to make some inroads on the island of Montreal. They had won a couple seats back in 2018, and that was seen as a big breakthrough. It was seen as a big surprise, and they were hoping to build on that, but clearly they haven't. They finished in third place in the vote in terms of the island of Montreal, and of course with just 2 seats. They did pick up one, but they also lost one. So for them, it's pretty much back to square one for them and Montreal.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned the Anglophone vote, and interestingly, when Legault, as you know, started the CAQ, he was talking about right-sizing the public service, getting Quebec to do better economically. But this time around, the focus really has been much more about the French language, French identity, immigration to the province. I'm wondering, does Legault's victory reflect the importance of those issues to Quebecers, or whether or not they actually agree that strongly? Or were they just stands that most voters did not find objectionable or objectionable enough to actually change their voting intentions?
I think there was 2 things at play here. One is that for CAQ voters, just the government's management of the economy is probably still the #1 issue. Cost of living and things like that are still really important to Quebecers, the healthcare system. So I think that the notion of the CAQ as a good party in terms of government management probably helped them the most. But the focus on French language, a lot of discussion about immigration, a lot of the discussion about immigration I think was in part because François Legault kept on making gaffes in terms of that issue that made him keep talking about it. But I think it was in terms of trying to keep on board a lot of the voters that they did pick up from the Parti Québécois. The Parti Québécois dropped quite a few voters, and a lot of them went to the CAQ. And if you look at the map of where the CAQ was able to pick up seats, it was at the expense of the Liberals, where they still had some Francophone support, and it was at the expense of the Parti Québécois, particularly in eastern Quebec. So I think that for François Legault, he had made the calculation that he was going to be losing some of those right-wing voters, center-right voters to the Conservatives. In order to keep those nationalist voters who care more about language and immigration, he had to go on those issues as well. So I think it was more of a calculation rather than an indication of where Quebecers are in terms of their priorities.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the other side, the Liberals were able to hold on to their official opposition status, but still they lost seats, and they also lost support among Francophone voters. So talk to us about the challenge Quebec Liberals now have in terms of finding support beyond the Anglophone and allophone vote.
That is really the biggest issue for the Quebec Liberals right now, because at the end of the campaign, the polls were giving them single-digit support among Francophones. This is a party that, back with Jean Charest or Philippe Couillard, would have won the Francophone vote when they formed government, and now they are barely registering. In parts of the province, they were at 5-6% support. You look at the Quebec City region, an area where the Liberals used to be able to win seats, they were at 5 or 6%. This is just a party that is no longer appealing to Francophone Quebecers, and especially Francophone Quebecers who don't live in the Montreal area, because if you look at the map now, they only hold a few seats that are in the Montreal suburbs, and then beyond that, you have to go to Pontiac in the Outaouais to find a Liberal riding. So the Liberals are in a lot of trouble. They did manage to hold on to official opposition status, and they were pretty happy about that. But this is now the second election in a row that is their worst election ever, and they need to figure out how they're going to get back into the Francophone parts of Quebec if they're ever going to form a government again. And this might be a bit of an example that is similar to what happened to the federal Liberals in the 2011 election. It required some catastrophic defeats before they were able to really refresh and rebrand themselves, because the Liberals really desperately need a rebranding of some kind, because right now they're just not appealing to that Francophone mass of voters that decide elections in Quebec.
Now that brings us to the other party that historically has governed the province for the past 4 or 5 decades, because the Parti Québécois, they too lost seats. They fell short of official party status within the National Assembly. Has the CAQ effectively laid claim to the issue of sovereignty and taken it away from the Parti Québécois?
Yeah, more or less. And it is a little ironic because François Legault said that he was getting into politics to get beyond that federalist sovereignist divide that has really been the feature of elections in Quebec since the 1970s. And he has effectively taken it off the table. That the Parti Québécois now is just getting the support of primarily people who care most about independence. And while support for sovereignty for Quebec still generally is in the 30 to 35% range in polls, it's just not a priority for a lot of even those sovereigntists. They rather vote for a party like the CAQ that has given Quebec a lot of the things that sovereigntists wanted, just more autonomy within the government. And he has taken the fight to Ottawa more than federalist liberal premiers would have in the past, but not going so far as to alienate people who don't want all of the tumultuousness of a referendum campaign. So he has effectively taken that issue off the table, and that's why that he has been doing so well and eating a lot of the PQ vote. You look at some of the places where the CQ was strongest. One of them was in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. That used to be Lucien Bouchard's area. It was a part of the province that was so strongly sovereigntist, and now it is strongly CAQ. And I think it shows how effective they have been in just eating the PQ's lunch.
Mm-hmm. And very quickly, as we're running out of time, I do want to talk about Quebec Solidaire, because there was talk of them perhaps becoming official opposition. That did not happen. Where did Quebec Solidaire fail to gain ground?
Yeah, it was just off the island of Montreal again. They did lose a seat in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. They managed to hold on a couple seats in Quebec City and one in Sherbrooke. But for them, it is just a little bit of a roadblock for them. They've managed to make progress in every election since they were formed. They did gain one seat, but they dropped a little bit in the vote. So for Quebec Solidaire, a little bit of a missed opportunity. They wanted to become the alternative to the CAQ. They'll have to wait at least another 4 years before they can try that again.
Okay. Éric Grenier, always great to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you.